20% up last year, and I know the
Right.
pandemic.
Well, right. I think nationally, violent crime, they said homicide is up 20,000 homicides nationally last year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'll wait for you to be ready. And so, well, I'll explain a few things about what we are now doing versus what maybe we had been doing. So there's some things that are in progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I mean, just overall, the sense of what you're getting this year compared to, and I know you haven't been here, but
Sure.
what is crime looking like in Fargo when it comes to violence?
Well, I think there's a general sense that there seems to be a little more violent crime in the community than previous, although I think 2020 was nationally a pretty violent year across our country. Homicides are up 20,000 across the United States in 2020, according to an FBI report, and violent crime is also up in a lot of areas of the country. So is that an anomaly from 2020, or will we see it increase is yet to be, I guess, known. We're continuing to track our 2021 crime and especially our violent crime because we know it's a concern to our community. It's also a concern to us as law enforcement professionals.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to shootings, it feels like we have seen more shootings across the metro compared to 2020, at least
Sure.
to date. Is there anything driving that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the analysis is still out. You know, we're about 3 months into the year. I've been here 5 months. We've had 4 shootings, 4 persons shot in the city of Fargo. We have 3 out of 4 of those instances with persons in custody, so 75% are cleared. That, of course, doesn't make the victims feel any better about being victims of a shooting. Some of our regional areas have seen some shootings as well in West Fargo, and we've already coordinated with our partners in West Fargo and the Cass County Sheriff to have kind of a joint press conference and discussion about, to let the public know about how we're working together to address some of this violent crime.
Mm-hmm. So my understanding is in previous years, the Fargo Police Department did not track shootings, but that's about to change?
Yeah, so when I got here October 5th, and part of the department analysis piece that we did across the board was really our crime reporting, our clearance rates, case prosecution success rates, those types of things that help really identify whether or not we're having an impact. Are we being successful in our investigations and our responses? And so while the department did report broad uniform crime report numbers, shootings count in a very large category called aggravated assaults. And so Fargo PD had 412 aggravated assaults in 2020. So somewhere in those 400 are anyone that would have been shot. So we're really unable, it just wasn't tracked separately. One of the things I directed right after the initial analysis was that starting in 2021 that we track shootings and that we also track separately shots fired. Those are incidents where no one is hit, but we know that shots are fired. So either a house could be hit with gunfire, a car, we could find cases in the street following a report from a citizen that they had heard shots. And so all of that is tracked separately as well, both in terms of incidents and arrests. And it's also part of our enhanced investigative protocol in terms of using that ballistic and submitting that ballistic evidence to the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network, which helps correlate and tie crime scenes together. So that should help us in terms of being able to clear more of those crimes. So this year will be kind of a baseline for us in establishing those numbers. So it's hard for us to really compare accurately to previous years.
Mm-hmm. So why didn't the Fargo PD track them before? And I guess you kind of probably touched on it, but why are we making that change now?
Well, why they weren't tracked before is that question I can't answer.
Right.
And why we're tracking them now is because I think it's an important component. And I think it's just a change in leadership and a change in vision of how the department should be run and what type of measurements we should be using to gauge our success and effectiveness. And this is obviously one that's pretty critical.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned about correlating that data. What do you hope this data, once you get it, will tell the police department or maybe help them in their efforts to prevent crime?
Sure. Well, I think what it tells us, number one, is we already know we have a couple of areas of the city where some of this has been rather prevalent. So we're already concentrating our efforts in those areas of the city where we have gunfire type complaints or incidents. So it's really utilizing our resources to go after those instances, people and locations that are particularly involved in these. So instead of a shotgun approach, we take a more specific intelligence-led approach to what we're doing. And so we're already working in those areas. We've had, I would say, already a lot of success in the Arbors area. We've been running a number of directed patrol missions there, again, concentrating on persons and locations that are involved, and had, I think, been relatively successful to date. So, I mean, we're going to have to continue to watch that, but there's other areas of the city as well. So it's identifying those things through crime analysis and then through the intelligence-led process, directing our shift commanders, directing our beat officers in their attention and their direction to these specific people and locations. The other part of it is looking at our clearance rates. So, you know, no one wants the crimes to occur. The other measurement of are we effective is are we actually identifying and arresting persons who are involved. That's not only a police department responsibility, it's a community responsibility. And we rely heavily on assistance from our community. And we got really a lot of support I've seen this year in the instances that we've investigated, specifically to Bismarck, even at the Arbors. And we've had a lot of community cooperation and support, which is good. It shows that the community trusts us to, you know, take the information, use it appropriately, and identify and arrest the perpetrator. So that combination, also a mark of success. And then what happens with the case when it goes over to the state's attorney? Are they chargeable cases? Are there cases they can take to the jury? And that could identify for us training issues. Maybe we need to enhance our training in particular investigative techniques, or we're doing a good job and they're able to move these cases ahead. So I think the murder trial that we had about a week ago is kind of evidence of some of the good investigative work that's happening. You don't get those types of cases and convictions without, I think, doing a lot of good work, but certainly there's always room for improvement, and that's really what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm. So Chief Monroe over in Moorhead mentioned that a big part of preventing crimes is allowing officers to be able to go into the communities and be able to do their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So what is Fargo doing as far as trying to prevent future shootings?
Sure. Well, again, it goes towards really the directed patrol missions, but we've also implemented a new staffing schedule that puts more officers on the street when we are statistically the busiest. And not just by virtue of calls for service, because calls for service aren't necessarily a good measure on their own of when we're busy. A lot of those calls don't amount to much police activity. So we also looked at our reported crimes. So it's calls for service, reported crimes. And we looked at 2019 because we thought 2020 may be kind of an anomaly year as a comparable, just to establish when we needed the most officers. We're now working in 10-hour rotations, so we've got, in some instances, twice the amount of officers that we may have otherwise had during certain times. And we'll continue to look at that data and adjust accordingly, but that's already, I think, been significant in our ability to respond. As an example, the robbery that happened at the Shell station or on University a couple weeks ago, that happened at a time when we would have normally been at a shift change and would have been at minimal numbers, but we weren't. We were in our shift overlap, and we had ample amount of officers that were able to respond, cordon off that area. Granted, the suspect was nice enough to call and say, hey, I'm involved, but we already had the area cordoned off and we were conducting a search and working on the case, and previously we wouldn't have had those resources on our own. At the same time, they had an incident on the south side of the city, a pretty significant crash that we were also able to investigate. So again, I think the data analysis shows in terms of when we need the most officers, and having them there puts us in those positions. It also puts us in an opportunity to have proactive engagement with our neighborhood folks and our communities, because we're not as much call to call as we may have been under the previous schedule. So that's, I think, a big step in the right direction. The department reorganization plan, which will be coming in the very near future, also helps facilitate all of those capabilities and creates, I think, a sustainable department growth pattern. So.
As far as the residents, what can they do to help prevent shootings or even more violent crime?
Well, I think in terms of prevention, a lot of what they do now, but certainly there's a lot of people in our community that probably know of folks who have illegal firearms or are involved in illegal activities. You know, some of these instances do involve drugs and dispute type things. Some of them are random. You know, the Bismarck was more of a incident that erupted inside of the tavern and went outside. So, but you know, for those that are aware of people who are involved in illegal activities, narcotics, guns, really calling our department and reporting that information. You know, we certainly, it's helpful to have a name and a contact number to work with in case we have additional questions. But certainly if people want to try and be anonymous, we'll take that information as well. But the more information they can provide us and the more we have the ability to check back with them, you know, maybe when we're in the area, hey, we're calling you because you said this was a suspicious vehicle you thought was involved in drugs or illegal weapons. I'm in the area now, I see a car, look out your window, tell me if that's the car. I mean, we could still do that in an anonymous sense and give us the information and the tools to help us make a stop and then take it from there.
What do you want residents to know about violent crime in Fargo? And maybe a better question is Fargo still a safe place to live?
I think Fargo is a very safe place to live, and I've worked in both Milwaukee, you know, a city of over about 600,000, Beloit, a city of 40,000, but one in which, you know, they struggle with violent crime and in periods, and also here in Fargo. And I think for a city our size that we are very safe. Looking at the FBI statistics, you can look at violent crime rate per capita, and we are average with cities our size in the I think 150 to 250,000 range. So we certainly love to be below average, and that's obviously going to be our goal, but we're certainly not above average in terms of that comparable. And there's a lot of ways to look at that as well. I think, you know, Fargo is also a very diverse city, both, you know, racially and ethnically, and I think that's a great thing. And as we continue to work in our neighborhoods to grow the community trust and relationships, we have a lot of people already that are providing us info, and that's great. That's what's going to help keep our city safe.
Well, I think that's all I had for you, unless you want to add anything.
No, I just really want to compliment the work of our department members across the board. They work every day to make sure Fargo's safe. And I think along with the community, we all want this to be a safe and prosperous city. It's also a city that is very much involved in growth. I mean, we're waiting for the census to come out, which I think everyone believes is going to show pretty significant growth in our city, and we continue to, I think, go in that direction. So the department is going to continue to grow and work with our community as that occurs. And again, I think that cooperative, that collaboration is what's going to keep us safe and keep making us safer.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, April.
Yeah.